we begin the show, I want to share some exciting news. The Proactive Employer has been picked up by World Talk Radio for a 13-week pilot. Beginning on May 3rd, we'll be broadcasting live at 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays. We'll be featuring 60 minutes of conversation with leading policymakers, thought leaders, and subject matter experts on key workplace challenges. Check our website, www.theproactiveemployer.com, for more details.
You're listening to The Proactive Employer with Stephanie Thomas. The Proactive Employer is your source for EEO and compliance issues, human resources best practices, and employment practices litigation risk management. Stephanie Thomas is an economic and statistical consultant, not a lawyer. The information contained herein should not be construed as legal advice.
Welcome to the Proactive Employer. I'm Stephanie Thomas. Struggling to stay abreast of equal employment opportunity compliance issues? The EEOC can help with some new programs outlined in the fiscal year 2012 to 2016 strategic plan. Since 1965, the EEOC has served as the nation's lead enforcer of employment anti-discrimination laws and chief promoter of equal employment opportunity. The agency's strategic plan was approved on February 22nd and establishes a framework for achieving the EEOC's mission to stop and remedy unlawful employment discrimination so that the Commission's vision of justice and equality in the workplace can be realized. The strategic plan lays out 3 objectives: to combat employment discrimination through strategic law enforcement, to prevent employment discrimination through education and outreach, and to deliver excellent service through effective systems, updated technology, and a skilled and diverse workforce. Here today to talk about the strategic plan and particularly how the agency's education and outreach programs can assist employers in their compliance efforts is EEOC Commissioner Chai Feldblum. Commissioner Feldblum was nominated to serve as a commissioner of the EEOC by President Barack Obama and was confirmed by the Senate for a term ending on July 1st of 2013. Prior to her appointment to the EEOC, Commissioner Feldblum was a professor of law at the Georgetown University Law Center, where she has taught since 1991. At Georgetown, she founded the Law Center's Federal Legislation and Administrative Clinic, which represented clients such as Catholic Charities, the National Disability Rights Network, and the Bazelon Center for Mental Health Law. She also founded and co-directed Workplace Flexibility 2010, a policy enterprise focused on finding common ground between employers and employees on workplace flexibility issues. As legislative counsel at the American Civil Liberties Union from 1988 to 1991, Commissioner Feldblum played a leading role in helping to draft and negotiate the groundbreaking Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Later, as a law professor representing the Epilepsy Foundation, she was equally instrumental in the drafting and negotiating of the ADA Amendments Act of 2008. Commissioner Feldblum has also worked to advance lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rights, has been one of the drafters of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and she's the first openly lesbian commissioner of the EEOC. She clerked for Judge Frank Coffin of the First Circuit Court of Appeals and for Supreme Court Justice Harry A. Blackmun after receiving her J.D. degree from Harvard Law School. Good morning, Madam Commissioner, and welcome to the Proactive Employer.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
We're thrilled to have you. For a lot of people, the first thing that comes to mind when they hear EEOC is investigation and litigation. But investigations and litigation are really only one part of what the EEOC does to promote equal employment opportunity. The agency is also actively engaged in education and outreach activities. How does education and outreach fit into the EEOC's overall approach?
Well, education and outreach is an essential element of the EEOC meeting the charge that Congress put on us. Okay, in 1964, when Congress enacted the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and created Title VII, which said that private employers could not discriminate based on race, sex, religion, national origin, the Congress told us, you are empowered and you are responsible for, quote, stopping alleged unlawful employment discrimination, okay, preventing unlawful employment discrimination. That was our responsibility. Okay, that's sort of a big job to prevent unlawful employment discrimination. And so Congress actually created a very, complicated system in which people who felt they were discriminated against had to come to the agency, file a charge. We had to investigate. If we thought there was reasonable cause that discrimination had occurred, we had to bring in the employer or the union that the claim was against, and we had to try to see if we could stop the discrimination. And then as a last resort, we would go to court. Okay, so that's everything that Congress told us we had to do to prevent unlawful employment discrimination. And so that's our responsibility. We have to do that. But also in 1964, Congress said, you also need to go out and educate employers and employees about their obligations and their rights under the law. That the best way to make sure that discrimination doesn't happen in the first place is for you, this agency that's responsible for implementing the law, to be out there in the community explaining the law to people. In fact, there was even a provision that said that if an employer felt that his or her employees were going to have difficulty complying with the law, the employer could reach out to the agency and say, I need some technical assistance with my employees, right? Because you imagine it's in the 60s. Lots of white people are not interested in working with black people. And so Congress actually puts in a provision that says you can go to this agency and they will help you with your own employees to understand the law. So from the beginning, from the perspective of Congress, education and outreach was an essential component of our responsibility as an agency. The problem, of course, is that since Congress also created this whole system of charges have to come to us before they go to court, and they never really gave the agency enough money to investigate all those charges well, I think the agency has often been focused too much on just the investigations and not as much on the education and outreach. And this strategic plan is really an effort to rebalance the focus, not to stop doing what Congress has mandated us to do. We have to do that, but to just elevate the importance of education and outreach.
And now you just mentioned the strategic plan, and the strategic plan has recently been approved. And one of your strategic objectives in that plan is to prevent employment discrimination using education and outreach. And historically, you've had education and outreach programs aimed, like you mentioned, at both employees and employers. So let's start with the employee side. And could you tell us, how has the agency educated employees and job seekers about EEO issues? And what kinds of activities are planned for the next 5 years?
Okay, so one of the things that's important about this strategic plan, we have to do one every 4 to 5 years, again, based on a statutory requirement. In the previous strategic plan, the one we were operating on from 2007 to 2012, there was not a specific strategic objective on education and outreach. Now, that doesn't mean we didn't do education and outreach, and I'll describe some of the things we've done, but there wasn't an explicit objective. And so one of the things that's different about this plan is that even though the resources, the labor costs that we spend is still going to be obviously spent more on investigators because, again, we have to get that job done. Congress has required us. While a lot of the labor costs will still go to our investigators and our lawyers and our mediators, in terms of priorities, in terms of thinking about the importance, this strategic plan has lifted up the education and outreach. So what have we done in the past, and how is this strategic plan going to maybe make things be a bit different? What we have right now is 15 district offices around the country, and then field offices and local offices, so altogether 53 physical offices. And in each of the 15 district offices, there's a person called a program analyst. It's a sort of bizarre name. Really what that person is the outreach and education person. So think about that. That's only 15 people in the entire agency, right? One in each of the district offices that's responsible for outreach and education. And then we have a few people, 5 or 6 people here in headquarters that are responsible for the fee-based training, training that we do where we charge money for. So you got these 15 people who are out there to help out with employees and job applicants to learn about their rights. Well, what they do is they pull other staff from the agency. So someone who's usually doing investigations or a lawyer who's usually litigating, that program analyst might grab that person and say, hey, I'm going to talk to this community group. Can you come with me and talk to them about the law? So basically what they've been doing is lots and lots of meetings, just these, show up at meetings, give a talk, an our report note. We do something like 5,000 of these, events across the country, different ways, large, small. We're not going to stop doing that. These program analysts have relationships with different community groups, and they'll continue to do these speeches that are for free, But what this strategic plan says is that what you need to do is find a few community groups that have relationships with employees and job seekers and work with them to develop a more ongoing program. Okay, so for example, find someone that works with high school kids and then don't just show up once a year, but show up maybe 3 or 4 times a year and actually integrate your work with the work of that organization. Because that way we're just going to solidify the relationship more. And also these are the groups that have relationships with folks who are going to be seeking jobs. These are the folks whom these folks might come to. These are the organizations these folks might come to if they've experienced discrimination. So we're going to focus on actually doing deeper partnerships with community groups that can then reach out to the employees and job applicants.
So let's now switch and talk about education and outreach on the other side of the equation for employers. And just to be clear, I'm using the term employers here to mean employers and unions, employment agencies, and covered entities. And in addition to the information and the policy guidance that's offered on the agency's website, you mentioned the training, the fee-based training programs, and technical assistance events. The EEOC's outreach program, how is this going to develop, and how are you going to augment the offerings to employers going forward?
Okay, so this is a real desire of mine to make our outreach to employers big and small. You'll see we do have a specific focus on small business that you and I can talk about, but here I'm talking about big, medium, small, all employers. My basic sense as I go around the country and talk to people is most employers would like to comply with the law. I mean, that's why I love that you've got your thing is called a proactive, right, employer. I mean, most employers that I meet want to comply with the law. The thing is, they're also just trying to make a business happen. They have a lot of other things on their minds. Again, whether they're big, medium, or small. But I'm going from the premise that employers would like to comply with the law. I'm also going from the premise that some things about the law are very simple and straightforward, and employers don't actually need a lot of technical assistance to be able to say to their supervisors, managers, excuse me, if you have someone who comes in and says, well, I don't think a woman can do this job, That's a problem. You don't need to come to training from us at the agency to know that that's a problem. But other aspects of the law are more complex, and therefore it is our job as an agency to make sure that employers understand what the law actually requires so that they can then make sure that their supervisors and their managers are applying the law correctly. So, for example, if someone is posting a new job opening, they're going to be promoting someone. There are 5 people working for them, and now there's going to be a promotion for one of the 5, and there's going to be a lot of traveling with that job. And of the 5 people, one of the people, and let's say all 5 of them are going to apply because they all want to move up, and one of the 5 has a 5-year-old kid and and a 2-year-old kid, right? That manager might think, in all good, quote-unquote, feelings or something, you know what, she really won't be able to do this traveling. She's so stressed. I can see she has young kids. I'm not going to consider her. That manager may think that he or she is being nice to that person, but that's not allowed. Right? Now, if that manager was silly enough to say to the woman, oh, no, I'm not even considering you because I'm afraid you're going to travel too much with these kids. And of the other 4 men, 3 of them also have young kids, and the manager didn't say it to them, right? If they're silly enough to say it out loud, that employer is going to spend a lot of money litigating that case. So you want to make sure that you've told the manager that's not okay, right? But lots of times the manager won't even say it out loud. So it's not even going to be that there's going to be a lawsuit. But if we've explained that that's not okay under the law, and then the businesses have explained to their managers that that's not okay under the law, what you've just done is given that woman a chance to compete. Now, she may not get the job, but, she's been given a chance to compete. Okay, so this is my backdrop. Before I tell you how we're actually going to, in practice, do this type of training and outreach to employers, I guess I want to make it very clear that I start from certain premises. 1, that most employers want to comply with the law. 2, that some aspects of the law are very straightforward and you don't need a lot of training. But 3, some aspects of the law are more complex. I just gave 1 example. We could think about 15 more. Okay, so how do we get this information out to employers? The way that we've done it up to now is we've done this thing called TAPS, Technical Assistance Programs, where each of these program analysts sets up 1 or 2 of these events over the course of the year. I've gone out and spoken at various TAPS, and I've been on the commission for a year and a half. My term goes for another year and a half, as you noted at the top of this program. I've gone to a lot of TAPs. I expect to go out to more. I think those TAPs are useful. And if there's any employer that is listening to this podcast and hasn't gone to a TAPS program put out by the EEOC, I strongly encourage you to go to the website, eoc.gov, scroll down to the Technical Assistance Institute, and it will list all the TAPs. One of the reasons I encourage that is that our TAPs are usually half the price of other programs because by law, the statute says we may not charge more for our programs than it costs us to put them on. Okay, so we are actually, by law, not allowed to try to make a profit through these programs. We have to try to figure out how much it costs and then charge that amount. So the TAPs are great programs. They will continue. In fact, I thought they were such good programs that I didn't understand why we were just depending on these 15 program analysts to do it. And we had never really done things on that from the headquarters level, that we would do what I would call a national TAPS. So we're doing a pilot project, which I've instigated here, and it's going to be specifically on the Americans with Disabilities Act and reasonable accommodation. Because now under the ADA Amendments Act, many, many more people with medical conditions are covered. That has implications specifically for leave issues, whether it's short-term leave like sick leave or long-term leave. So we are doing what I affectionately call the ADA Rock Tour, as in if I was really a rock singer, but we don't call that officially. It's just called the ADA something, national tour. But, for example, we're going to be in 5 cities in May and June. And if you go to the EEOC Gov website, you will see we'll be in Miami, LA, Denver, Detroit, and then hopefully also Boston and Seattle. So this will be a TAPS that is advertised nationally as opposed to the regional ones. So we'll continue to do TAPS. We'll hopefully be doing what I call TAPS on steroids, which are these national ones. And again, the price will be good because we can only charge what it costs us to put them on. But here's the second level down. Remember what I just said about the relationships with community groups? What this strategic plan is requires us to seek out relationships, longer-term relationships with employer groups regionally. Find out where's the employer group that people come to network. Work with them in terms of putting on a program. Show up at their event 2 or 3 times during the year. So the same type of, what we call significant partnerships that we're going to be asking our offices to create with community groups, we're going to require them to partner with employer groups in the same way so that we can have those deeper relationships. That was a long answer, Stephanie, to your question, but hopefully it was helpful.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. I want to go back to something you mentioned about the specific efforts that are targeted at small businesses, new businesses, and what the agency has termed historically underserved subsets of the employer community. Now, small businesses and businesses just getting started, they're dealing with limited financial resources. They're likely not to have a dedicated EEO compliance officer, and some of them don't even have in-house human resources departments. How does the EEOC plan to reach out to the small business and the new business just getting started?
That is a great question, and it's also something that I care a lot about. So just as a reference point, before I came on to the commission, I was a law professor at Georgetown Law School. I'll be going back to being a law professor when my term is over. And I started an entity called Workplace Flexibility 2010 in 2003. And actually, you can go to the website, workplaceflexibility2010.org. It still exists. It's got lots of great materials on it. But you'll see on it that we did a series of community forums during a period of 1 or 2 years to bring in businesses, including particularly small businesses, to talk about workplace flexibility issues. So through that work, I got to know a fair number of the local Chamber of Commerce's as well as SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management. Now, SHRM is a group that you think of if you have an HR person. That HR person, therefore, joins SHRM. But the truth is, a small business owner can join SHRM as well because the small business owner is him or herself the HR person. And SHRM puts out a lot of materials and a lot of advice. So from my perspective, the reason the significant partnership requirement of the strategic plan is so important is precisely for the small and new businesses. Because the big businesses with the HR departments, they can afford to spend a day at an event and get all this training. Can you imagine if you're a small business owner taking off a full day to sit and listen to training? I mean, it's just not even possible. But that small business owner is very focused on networking in order to get business. So there's clearly some group that small business owner is affiliated with simply to advance his or her business. What we're saying in this strategic plan now is you, the program analysts, you have 15 people around the country. We want you to look in your region who would be a type of group that small businesses might anyway show up to for networking purposes, or something that they're anyway going to do, and then see if you can show up there for 15 minutes, and give out some information, give out a brochure. Or figure out what are they doing in terms of social media, these small businesses? Who are they following? What are they doing in order, again, to expand their business? And let us be accessible to them through that social media. So, it can't be that we're going to wait for someone to come to us. New businesses, small businesses have a lot of things on their mind other than figuring out how to comply with employment laws. So that's our job as an agency, to spend some time figuring out how do we reach out to them. That's our job. That's what I feel we should be responsible for. So, how do we do it? I don't even know the best ways yet. I'm hoping that at least 10 people, maybe 100 people who listen, 1,000 people who listen to this podcast, sends me an email, and I will give you my email address right here. I will accept all emails with ideas of, you in this town in Illinois, this is who you should connect to with small business. I promise I will send that email on to the right person in Illinois. Okay, so my email address is chai, .feldblum, Feldblum, @eeoc.gov. Send an email with an idea of who someone should connect with. Now, I can't promise that will happen, but I'm telling you that I want our people to be thinking about how best to reach out to small and new businesses.
And it seems as though the focus really is on connecting and networking on the employee side, on the employer side, reaching out into those communities. And you mentioned social media, and I think social media is a great way to do that. And the plan actually mentions social media and the EEOC's website in particular. You're personally involved in social media. You've been tweeting about EEOC happenings and HR issues. That's actually how the two of us met, was through Twitter.
Exactly.
And you are very forward on the social media issues. Has your embracing of social media rubbed off on the rest of the commission? And are there plans to use social media for education and outreach in specific ways?
Well, it's interesting. I think I've shocked some people and delighted others with my extensive use of social media. I mean, there's no doubt that there are a number of people here. We have a wonderful Office of Communications and Legislative Affairs. We have a woman, Christine Nazer, who totally understands social media. The head of the office, Todd Cox, I think totally appreciates the utility of social media. But it is very hard sometimes to move a government agency, right, with like this big battleship. And because we are an independent agency, there are 5 commissioners appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate. So we have a certain independence, each of us, is one of the reasons why I was able to just start tweeting as Commissioner Chai Feldblum on my own. But I think there are a lot of people inside the agency that would very much like to see the agency get more sophisticated and more out there in terms of social media. We heard those voices, and that's why a specific measure was put into the strategic plan that we would develop a social media plan. I have to say that one of the things I noticed when I came here a year and a half ago is that things that I thought should be easy and should take like a month to happen, they don't take a month. It just takes longer. And I'm someone who likes to see things happen. Once I have an idea, I'm quickly trying to figure out how to implement and then move on it. So I've modified my expectations of how quickly something can get done. So I really don't know. I guess my answer is a lot of me might have rubbed off, and it still might take 2 years for us to see EEOC really out there in social media. I hope it doesn't take that long. I can absolutely assure you that we'll be working inside to keep moving it, but I just don't know how long it's going to take.
Well, we will definitely be keeping an eye on the social media frontier for the EEOC.
Excellent.
Now, we're going to have to start wrapping things up, and I want to ask you one final question. And we've been talking today about preventing discrimination through education and outreach. And I think that you would agree that taking a proactive approach to EEO compliance and preventing discrimination is really preferred to a wait until we get sued approach. Now, we know everyone's struggling to do more with less, and the current economic climate is really forcing everybody to carefully prioritize how they spend their resources. What would you say to employers who argue that being proactive about EEO compliance is too expensive? Why should proactive compliance be a priority?
Okay, so the first thing I would say to any such employer is you should get yourself on Twitter because that is the cheapest, easiest way to follow stuff. And then you should follow me at Chai Feldblum, and they should follow you at Proactive Employer. Because right there, they're going to discover that, at least in my tweets, every time there's a sexual harassment case where someone has shelled out $100,000, I say this was a good use of your money, especially when the facts are so egregious. So I think employers need to think about this as common sense. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you might have to shell out a whole bunch of money when you could have stopped it in the first place, right? I mean, the reason we have these aphorisms like, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of whatever it is. I mean, the thing is, this is basic common sense. Learn about it so that you don't end up spending money afterwards. But here's the other piece. If employers feel that learning about what the law requires is going to be too complicated and burdensome and costly, then they won't do it. So my message out here to anyone listening is it doesn't have to be costly. All of these employers should be using social media like Twitter to learn information very quickly, very easily. So it's not a huge burden to learn. And the agency is here to make sure that it's not going to be a huge burden to learn.
Great. Well, this has been a wonderful discussion. You've shared a lot of insights about the EEOC's direction, and we're looking forward to seeing those networking programs and the outreach into the community. If listeners have questions about the strategic plan or want more information on the education and outreach programs, or if they want to give you a suggestion about how to reach into those communities and be more effective, who should they contact?
Okay, so as I said, I will accept all emails and just forward them on to right people. But here's the person who's the head of the education and outreach at headquarters who talks to those 15 people across the country all the time. Her name is Cheryl Mabry Thomas. And so her email address, sorry, it's a long one, it's Cheryl, CHERYL, .Mabry, MABRY, Thomas, THOMAS, at EEOC.gov. And her phone number is 202-663-4811. I would certainly urge people to reach out to Cheryl with ideas, with suggestions, with questions. I mean, if you email her, you can go ahead and CC me. And Stephanie, if you can send out this information in a tweet with her email address and number, that would be awesome.
I will certainly do that, and we'll also list the contact information for Cheryl and for you on the Proactive Employer website.
Excellent. Thank you so much for reaching out to me, Stephanie, on Twitter. I think you're my first Twitter friend that I met through Twitter and now have met over the phone, and I look forward to meeting you in person at some point.
Well, it sounds wonderful, and thank you again so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The Proactive Employer with Stephanie Thomas. We are happy to answer any questions you may have, and we encourage you to contact us with suggestions for future installment topics. You can find our contact information on the podcast homepage, www.theproactiveemployer.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us for future installments of The Proactive Employer.